There are truths so deep, so ancient, they echo before the foundations of the world, not whispered, but declared in fire, in glory, in the voice that spoke creation into being. And at the center of it all is not a theory, not a distant deity, not a symbol of religion, but Jesus, the eternal Word, the I Am, the one who stood in eternity before time began and still stands now, unshaken. We've spent so long shrinking him to fit our understanding, painting him into quiet corners, softening his glory to match our comfort zones. But what if he is more? What if the same Jesus who wept over Lazarus and walked the dusty roads of Galilee is also the one whose eyes are flames of fire, whose robe fills the heavens, whose voice sounds like many waters? What if the carpenter was always the king? And if that's true, if Jesus truly is the Alpha and the Omega, the uncreated creator, the one who holds the keys of life, death, and eternity, then everything we believe, everything we are, and everything we live for must be rebuilt on that foundation. This isn't just about believing in him, it's about beholding him, being changed by the weight of his glory, the beauty of his mercy, the power of his presence. So if your heart stirred during this video, if something in you felt awakened, if a question cracked open, or a piece of your soul finally felt seen, don't let it end here. This was not just a message, it was an invitation to go deeper. To see Jesus not through the lens of culture or tradition, but through the blazing clarity of truth. Let me ask you gently, who is Jesus to you really? Is he just a memory? A Sunday story? A name whispered in emergencies? Or is he the center of your being, the source of your breath, the one you'd give everything to follow? You don't have to answer with perfection, but you do have to answer with your heart. If this video helped bring light to your shadows or reminded you that eternity is nearer than it feels, I invite you to reflect that light back. A like, a comment, a subscription. These small things are not just digital. They are spiritual signals, ways of saying, yes, I hear, I see, I believe. And if you feel this message has added value to your soul or helped you see Jesus more clearly, I gently ask you to consider offering a little energy back to help keep these messages flowing. Every small encouragement, every gesture of support means more than you know. It's not about money, it's about mission. If you believe more people need to hear the unfiltered truth of who Jesus really is, before creation, beyond death, and above all, help shine that light by sharing this video. Someone's breakthrough may be on the other side of your share, and if you're still on the edge, still wondering, still searching, I honor that. Stay, wrestle, seek, because Jesus never hides from honest hearts. He reveals himself when we're willing to knock. So comment below, he is more than I imagined, if your spirit was stirred. Or simply share your thoughts, your story, your struggle. This is a space where we lift each other, where glory meets grace, where revelation becomes real life. Thank you for letting me speak into your spirit today. Thank you for your time, your trust, your openness. Thank you for choosing not just to watch, but to listen. And above all, thank you for letting Jesus speak. Not just to your ears, but to your soul. This is only the beginning. Let the veil keep lifting. Let the fire keep burning. Let Jesus be glorified in your heart, your home, your story, forever. The pre-existent Word, Jesus before creation. In the beginning, there was no earth beneath our feet, no sky stretched above, no breath in our lungs, only God, infinite and eternal. And in that stillness, in that pre-creation hush, Jesus already was. Not a thought, not a plan waiting to unfold, but the living Word, the one through whom everything was made. John chapter 1:1 doesn't suggest he began at Bethlehem. It declares, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." This is the foundational truth that reorders everything else. Jesus is not part of creation. He is the cause of it. He did not step into time as a late actor on the stage of human history. He wrote the story. He breathed galaxies into existence. He spoke light into darkness. Colossians 1:17 reminds us that he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. That means every atom in your body, every beat of your heart, every moment of your life exists not by accident, but by his sustaining power. You are not random, you are remembered, you are held. This truth brings healing to a restless generation searching for purpose. When you know that your Creator is not distant, not detached, but deeply involved, even before you took your first breath, everything changes. You are not an interruption in God's story. You are an intentional creation by the one who was, who is, and who will forever be. A child once asked, "Where was Jesus before he was born?" And the answer is astonishingly simple and stunning. He was with the Father, in glory, beyond time, beyond matter, eternal, complete, reigning. And he chose to step down, not because he had to, but because love moved him. If this shakes your understanding of Jesus and expands it into something deeper and more beautiful, type in the comments, "Jesus is eternal." Because the story of salvation didn't begin in a manger, it began before time, in the heart of the eternal Son. The veiled glory. When the King walked among us, the shock of the gospel is not just that Jesus is God, but that God chose to become man, and not in a display of divine dominance, but in quietness, wrapped in skin, clothed in the dust of our world. Philippians chapter 2:6-7 tells us that, though he was in the form of God, he did not consider equality with God something to cling to, but emptied himself. This is the miracle of Kenosis. Jesus did not lose his divinity. He laid aside his glory, choosing humility over exaltation. He didn't descend with thrones or trumpets. He came crying in a stable, walking through fields, touching lepers, kneeling to wash feet. The very hands that shaped planets now wiped the faces of the broken. This wasn't weakness. It was the deepest strength the world has ever known. Think about it. The one who thundered on Mount Sinai whispered his parables in Galilean hillsides. The one who commands legions of angels chose to sleep, eat, weep. His glory wasn't gone. It was hidden so we wouldn't be destroyed by it. He made himself approachable, and that alone is a radical act of mercy. A woman once said, "If God is real, why doesn't he make himself obvious?" And perhaps the real question is, why did he make himself so gentle, so near, so human, so that even the weakest among us could draw close without fear? Because that's what love does. Love lowers itself to meet us in our pain. If you've ever felt like God is distant, remember, he has already walked where you walk. He has felt what you feel. He has chosen to be near. Comment, "God with us," if that brings healing to your soul. Because the next time you see Jesus in Scripture feeding the hungry, forgiving the fallen, calming the storm, remember that is veiled glory, divine majesty in a robe of mercy. The vision of John. The unveiled Jesus in Revelation. One day, the veil came off. The Jesus whom John had leaned on at the Last Supper, the Jesus who broke bread, laughed with sinners, and was crucified in weakness, appeared again, not in humility but in glory. Revelation 1 gives us a picture not of the servant, but of the sovereign. His eyes were like blazing fire, his voice like the sound of rushing waters, his face like the sun shining in full strength. John, the disciple who once rested against his chest, now falls to the ground as if dead. This is the same Jesus, but now The covering is gone. The glory once hidden in Nazareth now roars in majesty. The same voice that forgave the woman caught in adultery now speaks with the authority that governs all history. The same hands that touched the eyes of the blind now hold the keys of death and hell, and this moment reminds us, Jesus is not passive. He is not just kind. He is King. He is not only tender, he is terrible in majesty. This is not the safe, tame version of Jesus many have reduced to a religious mascot. This is the Lion of Judah, burning with justice, crowned in eternal dominion. One pastor once said, "Many worship a version of Jesus they would never fall before." But the Jesus of Revelation doesn't ask for admiration. He demands surrender. And yet, in all his glory, what does he do when John collapses? He touches him and says, "Do not be afraid," because even at the height of his majesty, he remains merciful. If this vision stirs your spirit or challenges how you've seen Jesus before, comment, "Show me more of you," because the one John saw is the same one who walks among us still, and when we see him rightly, we begin to live rightly. Jesus and the angels. What sets the Son apart? There are beings in heaven so radiant that their presence causes men to tremble. Angels with wings of fire, voices like thunder, beauty that stuns and power that moves nations. But none of them, not one, is ever called God. None receives worship. None sits on the throne. Only Jesus. Hebrews 1 makes it abundantly clear. To which of the angels did God ever say, "You are my son, today I have begotten you"? Let all God's angels worship him. Jesus is not the highest angel. He is in a completely different category. Angels are created. Jesus is creator. Angels serve. Jesus reigns. Even Michael, the archangel, leads armies, but he bows before the Lamb. In Revelation 5, heaven erupts in worship not around an angelic figure, but around the Lamb who was slain. And that Lamb is Jesus. All of heaven joins together. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain to receive power and wealth and wisdom and strength and honor and glory and praise. There are still many today, spiritual seekers, New Age thinkers, even some faith traditions, that reduce Jesus to being a powerful messenger or enlightened being. But Jesus never claimed to be like the angels. He claimed to be above them. He accepted worship. He forgave sins. He called himself, "I am." Either he is who he says he is, or we must call him a fraud. There is no in-between. A believer once shared, "I used to think Jesus was one of many ways to get to God, until I realized he is the God all other ways bow to." That realization changes everything. When you understand that even angels worship him, you stop negotiating with obedience. You start living in awe. If you want to honor Jesus not just with lips, but with the fullness of your heart, type "Jesus is above all" in the comments. Because when we elevate him to his rightful place, everything in our lives finds its place under his feet. And the next step in this journey will take us into even deeper mystery, how this same Jesus who reigns also became flesh, walked among us, and bore our pain to lift us up. I and the Father are one. The divine identity unveiled. When Jesus stood before the crowds and declared, "I and the Father are one," John 10:30, he wasn't offering poetic language or symbolic sentiment. He was making the most audacious claim imaginable. He is God, not merely sent by God, not simply anointed or inspired, but one in essence, in being, in glory with the Father. The religious leaders knew exactly what he meant, and they picked up stones to kill him, crying blasphemy, because to them, no man could say such things. But Jesus wasn't a man trying to become God. He was God who became man. This claim wasn't isolated. Again and again, Jesus made statements that revealed his divine nature. Before Abraham was, I am. Whoever has seen me has seen the Father. I have the authority to lay down my life and take it up again." These were not the declarations of a moral teacher or a prophet pointing toward God. These were the very words of the living God, speaking as only He could. And if we hear them clearly today, they demand a response, not admiration, but adoration. When we embrace this truth, it changes how we relate to every aspect of life. Suddenly, the teachings of Jesus are not helpful suggestions, they are divine commands. His promises are not comforting wishes, they are eternal realities. His forgiveness is not a hopeful wish, it is absolute authority to erase sin forever. There's a quiet moment that happens for every believer, when the truth of who Jesus is moves from the head to the heart. When it ceases to be a belief system and becomes the center of your very existence. A man once said, "When I realized that the carpenter of Nazareth was the one who crafted galaxies, I could no longer casually follow him. I had to fall to my knees." If your heart awakens to this truth right now, type in the comments, "Jesus is one with the Father." Let it be your declaration. Let it burn away every small version of Jesus you've ever been taught, because the one who is one with the Father is also the one who became one of us. The Incarnation. When eternity stepped into flesh, He could have come in fire and smoke, in thunder and lightning, in the brilliance of unveiled glory. But He came through the cry of a newborn, wrapped in cloth, placed in a manger. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. This is not metaphor. This is miracle. The infinite folded into the finite. The eternal chose time. The Creator was carried in the arms of a teenage girl. This is the Incarnation, the humility of God displayed in its most radiant form. Jesus did not pretend to be human. He was not God in costume. He truly walked in our dust, breathed our air, wept our tears, carried our weakness. And yet, in every step, He remained fully divine. The one who shaped the universe now shaped tables in a carpenter's shop. The one who held the oceans now cried from thirst. The one who thundered at Sinai now whispered healing to the broken. This truth is not only staggering, it's healing, because it means God is not distant. He is not watching from above, untouched by your suffering. He knows it, not by observation, but by experience. He knows betrayal. He knows hunger. He knows what it feels like to be misunderstood, rejected, even abandoned. And because He walked that road, He can walk with you in yours. One woman, after years of trauma, finally said through tears, "I can trust Jesus, because He didn't just save me from pain, He entered into it with me." That is the comfort of the Incarnation. We don't follow a God who stayed in heaven. We follow the God who came down, who touched lepers, who lifted the faces of outcasts, who was called Emmanuel, God with us. If this moves your heart, comment, "He became flesh for me." Let this be more than theology. Let it be your story. Because the one who entered our world did not come to simply visit, He came to conquer. And that path led straight to the cross. 5 false views of Jesus, and why the truth still sets you free. For centuries, people have tried to remake Jesus into their own image. Some soften Him, others politicize Him, many ignore the parts of His identity that challenge their worldview. But truth cannot be rewritten without consequence. When we alter who Jesus is, we lose the power of the gospel. The first false view is Jesus as only a prophet, a man sent by God, but not God Himself. Yet over and over, Jesus forgave sins, accepted worship, and claimed equality with the Father. No true prophet ever did such things. To reduce Him to a prophet is to deny the very heart of His mission. The second is Jesus as a moral teacher, wise, compassionate, inspiring. But moral teachers don't call themselves the way, the truth, and the life. They don't accept the title, "I am." They don't rise from the dead, If Jesus was only a teacher, then he was either deceived or deceptive. But we know better, because the tomb is still empty. The third view sees Jesus as a created being, perhaps the highest of them, but not eternal. This view was condemned in the early church as heresy, because Scripture says clearly, "Through him all things were made, and without him nothing was made that has been made." You can't be both creator and created. The fourth says, Jesus is just one way among many, a spiritual guide alongside others. But he said plainly, "No one comes to the Father except through me." That statement isn't arrogant. It's merciful clarity from the one who paid the price no one else could. The fifth is the most dangerous. Jesus as an idea, a symbol of hope or love, not a real person, not a real God. But Jesus was not an idea. He was flesh and blood, crucified under Pontius Pilate, buried and risen. To reduce him to metaphor is to erase the blood that saves us. If you've ever wrestled with any of these, you're not alone. But let the truth lead you home. Comment, "I believe in the real Jesus," if your heart is ready to leave distortion behind, because clarity brings freedom. And when we see him rightly, we begin to recognize that he was present long before Bethlehem. Shadows of the sun, finding Jesus in the Old Testament. Before Mary, before the manger, before even the promise to Abraham, Jesus was already there. Not in name, but in presence. Not always seen, but always moving. The Old Testament is not void of Christ. It is filled with his shadow. Every symbol, every sacrifice, every storyline points toward the one who would come. In Genesis, we see the Trinity whispered, "Let us make man in our image." Who is us? Not angels. It is the triune God, Father, Spirit, and Son. Jesus was present, active, speaking creation into being. And he doesn't step off the page there. In Genesis 22, when Abraham lays Isaac on the altar, a ram appears, a substitute, just as Christ would become our substitute. In Exodus, the Passover lamb's blood saves Israel from judgment. Centuries later, John the Baptist sees Jesus and declares, "Behold the Lamb of God." The connection is no accident. Jesus is not a new plan. He is the plan hidden in plain sight. In Numbers, the people are saved by looking at a bronze serpent lifted up on a pole. Jesus refers to this moment saying, "Just as Moses lifted up the serpent, so must the Son of Man be lifted up." Healing through the lifted one, always the message. In Isaiah 53, the suffering servant is pierced, crushed, wounded for our transgressions. This isn't vague poetry. It is precise prophecy. It reads like a biography of Calvary, written 700 years before the nails were hammered. From the tabernacle to the temple, from Melchizedek to manna, from Joseph's betrayal to Jonah's 3 days in darkness, the fingerprints of Jesus are everywhere. Every story is a shadow. Every miracle is a whisper. Every deliverance is a doorway to the deliverer. One theologian said, "The Old Testament is a house with the lights turned off. When Jesus walks in, every room lights up." If this opens your eyes, comment, "He was there from the beginning." Because once you start seeing Jesus on every page, the Bible stops being a book and starts becoming a revelation. And the deeper we go, the clearer it becomes. The one who always was is also the one who holds our future. And the next chapter reveals how this eternal Jesus, full of glory and grace, is not only our past, but the key to our eternal future. Jesus the Creator, how the Son spoke the universe into being. In the vast silence before time was measured, before stars blinked into existence, Jesus, the eternal Word, declared with authority that shattered the void, "Let there be light." Through him, all things were made. Nothing exists outside his command. Imagine the wonder of a universe meticulously arranged at his word, galaxies spiraling in divine order, planets dancing in orbits set by his creative hand, and every living cell bearing the imprint of his craftsmanship. This is not a metaphor, but the awe-inspiring truth that Jesus is not merely part of creation. He is the very source from which creation flows. When we encounter the beauty of nature, a sunrise, a starry night, the bloom of a wildflower, we are witnessing his handiwork. Every detail, no matter how small, reflects the precision and power of the Creator. A young child gazing upward, eyes wide with wonder, unwittingly proclaims that the same one who set the heavens in motion also cares enough to create them with such artistry. This truth heals, reminding us that we too are deliberate creations, known and cherished by the one who spins galaxies into existence. If you feel your spirit stir as you ponder that the one who created everything also calls you by name, let your heart respond with, "Jesus is my Creator." And as you carry this truth in your soul, remember that the Creator who spoke the cosmos into being is the same one who speaks life into every moment of your day. The Theology of Kenosis, what Jesus gave up and why. In an act of divine humility that defies human expectation, Jesus, though fully God, did not cling to the full display of his glory. Instead, he chose to empty himself, taking on the form of a humble human being. This powerful concept of kenosis reveals that the infinite, boundless God willingly set aside every divine privilege to experience our world, our struggles, and our pain. Picture the Creator of all things, who could have enveloped himself in dazzling radiance, choosing instead to enter into the ordinary, a dusty village, modest homes, the humble marketplace. In this extraordinary self-emptying, Jesus embraced the full measure of humanity, accepting hunger, fatigue, and even suffering, so that he might fully understand and redeem our brokenness. This act is the ultimate expression of love. The God who could not be contained became one with us, absorbing every sorrow and sharing every joy. It's as if a powerful king renounced his crown to walk as a commoner, so that every soul, no matter how wounded, might feel the warmth of his presence. A woman once overwhelmed by loneliness and despair found comfort in knowing that Jesus, who had experienced every bitter taste of sorrow, now stood beside her, not in judgment, but in shared compassion. His willingness to sacrifice divine splendor for human frailty teaches us that true strength lies not in dominance, but in vulnerability and service. When we learn to embrace our limitations and offer our broken selves to God, we find that in our surrender, His power is made perfect. Let this truth ignite your spirit. If you believe that Jesus chose humility over heavenly fanfare, declare in your heart, "He emptied himself for me," and let that conviction transform your understanding of true greatness. Jesus and the cross, the glory hidden in humiliation. The cross, a symbol of utter defeat in the eyes of the world, becomes the stage on which the eternal drama of salvation unfolds. Here, the King of Kings did not wear a crown of gold, but a crown of thorns, and instead of a throne, he chose the crude wooden cross. This instrument of despair was transformed into the gateway of hope, the altar where divine mercy met human sin head-on. In that moment of excruciating pain, when Jesus' body was broken and blood flowed freely, the glory of God was not diminished, but radically displayed. It is in the paradox of suffering that the true nature of His love is revealed. The same hands that sculpted mountains and commanded the seas now bore the weight of our transgressions, proving that His power is perfected, not in ease, but in sacrifice. Consider the story of a man who, burdened by guilt and shame, once believed he was unworthy of love until he encountered the cross. In that piercing moment, he realized that no error was too vast, no wound too deep for the redeeming blood of the Lamb. The cross shatters the illusion of power that the world holds, showing us that true victory is found not in avoiding pain, but in offering it up in radical love. The cross teaches us that authenticity in faith requires a willingness to confront our brokenness. It reminds us that we, too, are invited to lay aside our pride and accept healing. If this profound mystery of the cross speaks to you, let your voice rise with glory in the cross as a testament to the divine trade that has redefined our destiny. For every tear shed in sorrow, there is a tear of joy waiting to burst forth when we see beyond the pain to the triumphant promise of resurrection. What the Transfiguration reveals about the Son of God, a glimpse of eternal radiance. On a secluded mountaintop, far from the noise of daily life, Jesus was transfigured before his closest disciples. In that radiant moment, his face shone like the full light of the sun, and his garments became dazzlingly white, a reflection of divine purity and power. Moses and Elijah, representatives of the law and the prophets, appeared alongside him, testifying that the long-awaited promise was being fulfilled. This wondrous event wasn't merely a miracle, it was a revelation of Jesus' true identity, a powerful preview of the glory that would follow his resurrection and return. The Transfiguration is a pivotal moment, a divine intersection between human frailty and heavenly brilliance. It teaches us that while Jesus walked among us in humble guise, his essence remained unaltered, radiant, and eternal. In that mountaintop vision, the disciples were given a foretaste of what it means to encounter the living God, not as a distant figure, but as a vibrant, transforming presence that enlightens the darkest corners of our hearts. Imagine standing amidst swirling clouds of light, witnessing the edge of eternity touching your life, and feeling an overwhelming surge of hope and purpose. That is the promise encapsulated in the Transfiguration. No matter how hidden his glory may seem in our daily struggle, the ultimate reality of his divine majesty is ever present, ready to lift us out of despair into everlasting joy. This vision challenges us to hold on to hope even when life feels dim, reminding us that our Savior, though concealed in humility, remains glorious beyond measure. If your heart is stirred by this revelation, let your words be a silent chorus of "Show me your glory" in the comments, affirming your desire to live in the light of Christ's eternal presence. And as we journey forward from this glimpse of heavenly radiance, remember that every shadow you encounter can be overcome by the brightness of the one who is eternally glorious. Through these timeless truths, we discover that the eternal Jesus, Creator, Redeemer, and King, calls each of us to a higher purpose. His divine identity, his willingness to humble himself, his sacrificial love on the cross, and his unveiling in a moment of pure glory are not distant theological concepts, but living realities that transform our everyday lives. When we grasp that Jesus is both immanent and transcendent, we find strength to face our darkest moments with the assurance that the same one who shaped the cosmos holds our future in his hands. In his presence, fear fades, despair is replaced by hope, and every broken piece of our lives is gently mended. Our hearts beat in rhythm with the Creator's love, and our spirits soar with the promise of eternal radiance. Let these truths not remain abstract, but guide each step, inspire every breath, and ignite a passion for a life lived in divine purpose and intimate connection with the everlasting King. He holds the keys, Jesus' authority over death and the grave. There is no fear more universal, no shadow more deeply woven into the human soul than the fear of death. It stalks silently behind our victories, whispers in the night, and often leaves us pretending we're not afraid. But Jesus didn't come to ignore death. He came to conquer it. Revelation 1:18 rings with power. I am the living one. I was dead, and now look, I am alive forever and ever, and I hold the keys of death and Hades. That declaration changed everything. Keys represent authority. They mean access, ownership, final say. Death used to be the locked door every human would eventually face, and no one could open it from the inside. But Jesus stepped into that darkness willingly. He did not avoid it. He entered the grave, shattered its hold, and walked out with the keys in his hands. It's no longer a prison. It's a passage. Imagine the hands that once healed the blind now holding the very keys of eternity. The same voice that calmed storms now declaring that death has been defeated, not temporarily, not symbolically, but forever. That means for every believer, the grave is not the end. It's the beginning of glory. There's a story of a young woman dying from cancer. In her final days, she asked that a Bible be placed in her hands when she passed, and that her tombstone simply read, "She trusted the one who holds the keys." That's the kind of peace Jesus offers. Not denial, but dominion. If you've ever been afraid of death, know this. The one who loves you most has already walked through that valley and now holds authority over it. If that truth sets something free in you today, type in the comments, "He holds the keys." Let it be your reminder, your confession, your hope. Because Jesus doesn't just promise life, he is the Lord of life and death, and he alone determines the final word. The second coming. When the King returns in power. The same Jesus who walked dusty roads, wept with mourners, and healed the broken is coming again, but not in weakness. He will return in power, in radiance, in unveiled glory. Revelation 19 paints a vision unlike anything the world has seen. A white horse, its rider called Faithful and True, eyes like flames of fire, robes dipped in blood, and on his robe a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. This is not metaphor. This is prophecy. This is the culmination of every promise, the return of the rightful king. And he is not coming to take sides. He is coming to take over. Every injustice will be answered. Every tear will be wiped. Every knee will bow, and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. This is the hope of the church, not just a return to comfort, but a return to righteousness. A world made new, a throne established in holiness, the Lion of Judah roaring across creation with fire in his eyes and love still in his heart. And this changes how we live now, because we don't follow a memory. We await a king. We don't fight for victory. We live from victory, knowing the end of the story has already been written. We don't shrink in fear at the shaking of the world. We lift our heads, for our redemption draws near. A pastor once said, "The church should live like Jesus rose yesterday, ascended today, and is coming back tomorrow." That urgency, that expectation fuels the soul. It lifts the mundane into the eternal. So if your heart beats faster when you imagine the skies breaking open and Christ returning in splendor, comment, "Come, Lord Jesus," and let that cry shape your priorities, your passions, your posture, because the one who came in humility is coming back in fire, and he will not be denied his glory. From revelation to response, how then shall we live? Knowing that Jesus is eternal, pre-existent, creator, God in flesh, the one who holds the keys of death, and the one who is coming again, this knowledge is not meant to be admired from afar. It demands a response, a realignment, a surrender. It calls us to step out of casual belief and into consuming love. To say Jesus is God is not just a statement of doctrine. It is a declaration of allegiance. It is saying that he is Lord not only of the universe, but of my words, my choices, my desires, my wounds, and my future. If he is who he says he is, then I can no longer live like I am the center. That means waking up differently. It means walking through pain with deeper peace, knowing the one who wept in Gethsemane also reigns in glory. It means forgiving when it's hard because the one who forgave from the cross lives in me. It means loving boldly, living generously, standing for truth, and falling on our knees not out of duty, but out of delight. The early believers didn't just believe, they burned with it. Their lives were marked by power, their communities by compassion, their worship by awe. Why? Because they didn't just know about Jesus, they knew him, and they understood that to walk with him was to walk in resurrection life. There's a woman I met once who came from a life of addiction and despair. When asked what changed her, she didn't name a program or a sermon. She said, "Someone introduced me to Jesus, not the version on the wall, but the Jesus who met me in my mess and never walked away." That's the invitation to each of us, not to admire him from a safe distance, but to follow him wherever he leads. He is not safe, but he is good and he is worthy. So how will you respond? Let this not be a video you watched, but a moment that marked your soul. If your heart whispers yes, even a trembling, imperfect yes, write it in the comments. I want to live for Jesus. Let your confession echo through eternity. Because the one who was before all things is calling you now, not to perfection, but to presence, to walk with him, know him, and become like him. This is not the end of the message. It's the beginning of a life fully awakened by truth. Let that life begin today. Some truths don't just inform the mind, they awaken the soul. If your heart is still beating a little heavier, if your spirit feels like it's been reminded of something ancient and holy, that's not by accident. It's what happens when we come face to face with the eternal Jesus, the one who was before the world began, the Word through whom everything was made, the light that darkness cannot overcome. The Jesus who walked among us veiled in humility, yet never without glory. The Jesus who bled not to prove a point, but to pay a price. The Jesus who stepped out of the tomb not in secret, but in triumph. The Jesus who holds the keys of death and life and still chooses to whisper your name in love. When you begin to see him for who he truly is, everything changes. Fear begins to lose its grip. Shame starts to unravel. The voices that told you you're too broken, too far gone, too unworthy, those voices grow strangely quiet in the presence of the one who sees everything and still says, "You are mine." This is the kind of love that doesn't just repair, it recreates. The kind of truth that doesn't just convince, but transforms. You may not have all the answers. You may still be walking through grief, through questions, through valleys you've never dared to name out loud. But he is the God of valleys. He is the voice in your wilderness. He is the one who stood outside of time and yet stepped into it so you would never be alone. He doesn't wait for perfection. He comes for the heart that says, even in a whisper, "Jesus, I want to know you." And maybe this video found you at just the right moment. Maybe it was a reminder that you are not forgotten, that eternity is real, that Jesus is not a distant memory or a comforting story, but a living King who still heals, still calls, still speaks with power, tenderness, and purpose. Maybe this was the light in the fog, the answer to the ache you couldn't quite name. And if it was, I want to gently invite you to hold on to that. Don't let it fade back into the noise. Carry it with you. Let it speak into your decisions, your relationships, your hopes. Let it call you deeper. If this message reached something sacred in you today, if it lifted your eyes or helped you breathe, or reminded you that you are deeply loved, I'd be so grateful if you'd show a little love in return. Click like if this video brought light into your heart. Subscribe if your spirit longs for more content rooted in truth, rich in scripture, and flowing with grace. And if you want to help me keep creating these moments, sharing God's word in a way that heals and awakens, then I warmly welcome whatever energy you feel moved to offer. Whether it's a kind word, a share with a friend, or simply the quiet support that helps this mission stay alive, know that it means the world to me. If you've ever lit a candle in a dark room, you know what it means to guard the flame. That's what you do when you encourage work like this. You keep the light burning, not just for yourself, but for countless others who are searching for a glimpse of the divine in the middle of their chaos. And if this video became that for you today, if it brought warmth, clarity, or hope, I invite you to consider helping keep that flame alive. Just a little spark from your heart can go a long way in helping mine keep shining. Comment below what stirred you. Was there a line that lit something up inside you? A verse that came alive again? Or maybe a part of your story that finally made sense in the light of who Jesus truly is? Share it. Not just for me, but for the community of souls walking this journey with us. You never know who might need your voice today to feel a little less alone. Because this isn't just content, this is a calling, a sacred space. A place where we meet not just through screens, but through spirit. Where we let heaven speak into our ordinary days and let Jesus remind us that the story is still being written, and it is more beautiful than we ever dared imagine. If you feel like this video gave something meaningful to your soul, something gentle but deep, something fierce but healing, then I invite you to offer back a small light, in whatever way feels honest. It's not about transaction. It's about continuing the flow of grace. Every word, every share, every little act of support becomes part of a bigger story, one where people across the world are reminded that Jesus is not an idea. He's not a legend. He is the eternal truth, the healing flame, the King who still walks with us. Thank you, truly, from the deepest place in my heart, for making space in your day to walk this sacred path with me. You didn't just watch a video. You stepped into something holy. You opened your heart to the eternal, and you let the light in. That matters more than I can say. And if this light found you in the shadows, I pray it stays with you long after the screen fades. I pray it grows. I pray it leads you home. With all that I am, thank you. May grace cover you, may peace surround you, and may Jesus, the one who was and is to come, hold you close until the day every eye sees him and every heart finally knows. He was never far. He has always been here,